So I do want to go back to the morning I testified. It was March 31st, and you had your opening remarks that morning. And I've watched this video twice because I was sitting in the audience and I was just absolutely captivated by what you were saying. And I have watched the video 2 additional times after that because I was like, I want to be able to regurgitate this. And what you were talking about was that the public, those who were abiding by vaccine passports, were almost bragging or posting on their social media that they had done this. But the point that you had made was that it wasn't about the checkpoints, it wasn't about the Vax Pass, it was about sending the clear message from the government.
Do you want me to explain
Yes,
that?
please, because I thought it was brilliant. It was incredibly insightful.
Well, and it's also important for people to understand what happens psychologically. So if you back us up in time where we're locked in our homes, we're waiting for this vaccine to save us, and then the government starts imposing these restrictions or are basically granting people that had their identification papers, their passports, the right to do certain things. So back up before COVID. So in Canada, if you wanted to go to a hockey game, if you wanted to go to a restaurant, just to use those 2 examples, you didn't ask for the government's permission. You were free to do that. And you knew you were free because there was no restriction. There was no ritual for you to go through to be able to go to your kid's hockey game or to go to a restaurant. Now that's what freedom is when there's no restriction on you. Now, people that got the vaccine passport and used it, because some people got vaccinated and they had the passport and on ethical grounds they never used it. But if you use the vaccine passport, you were thinking, wait a second, I have freedoms that these unvaccinated people don't have, but you don't understand that actually you were going through a police state ritual. So to go to a restaurant, you had to basically show your identification papers. And where you were free to go to a restaurant before, now basically you had to go through this ritual where you showed your identification papers as a precondition for you being granted the privilege to go to the restaurant. So you understand it was no longer a right where you could just go. You had to go through this ritual of showing your identification papers so that the state would grant you the privilege. And what that does psychologically every time is it reinforces in your mind psychologically that the state is your master, granting you a privilege, because you have to go through this ritual of showing your papers as a precondition to the state granting you a privilege. When police states had roadblocks in cities, do you think they really cared where you were going? They didn't care one whit because they know where you live, they know where you're going home for supper and where you're going to sleep that night. It's the ritual reinforcing that you don't have the right to travel, that by showing your identity papers, going through this ritual for the state, then the state grants you the privilege. And it just reinforces every time you participate in that ritual, it reinforces that the state's your master and you are the servant. And you participated in this willingly. And now the government's going to come in and impose digital identification that we are going to have to show to access different things. And that's what you wanted me to explain, Tom. And I think it's important for people to understand that it's the ritual that's the danger, because it conditions you to be a servant, and it conditions you to understand very clearly that you don't have the right. If you have to show identification papers or go through any ritual to do something you used to be able to do, understand you're being conditioned to be in a police state.
And I had heard politicians all around the world use the word either permission or privileges. Mm-hmm. If you comply, we'll give you your privileges back. I mean, that to me sounds like a warden, not an elected official serving the people. And and I take the point as well that there was such effectiveness in this ritual and in this message that people would go to their social media and brag about being better than those who were not granted back the privileges. And this is where a lot of the divide started to really, really take root in society, the us versus them. It's like, I got my privileges back. You don't, because you're not a team player, or you're, somebody with unacceptable views. And so, I think that, like, this point, this is why when I heard it, I was like, I need to go back and listen to this again. And I think people need to get that. Whether you are one of those people who did brag about getting privileges back, you can't now ever in the future kind of look back and make the argument that, hey, there's a Charter of Rights in this country, because we talk about it and we say, well, this is our earlier point, where the government, are they the arbiters of truth? And, are they the ones who truly give us our rights? Because they're running around and they've convinced half the public that, yeah, actually the government gives me my rights. I wasn't born a free person. And we've gone through this ritual. And so now when the government decides to take away my rights, I can earn them back if I get in line,
Well,
if I behave.
you can be granted the privilege. I mean,
Yeah.
what's the difference between having to show your identification papers to get into a restaurant and, pre-Bill of Rights of First Nations persons having to
Yeah.
get a written permission from the government agent to go to the restaurant? Tell me the difference, because I don't see the difference.
Yeah. And it's difficult for me to reconcile the fact that the average Canadian can't see this glaring truth. So during your time, though, with, at the NCI, you've mentioned you've seen about 250 witnesses. What are the highlights? What are the ones that are the most shocking to you? The ones that really stand out for you?
So one is, and I forget her name, but she was in Saskatoon, and she was near the end of the day. I think she was near the end of the second day. And she was, well, it's funny. I was going to say she's a little old lady, but she came back the next day because I referred to her as that on my opening on the third day and say, no, you refer to me as esteemed elder. So she was an esteemed elder who, she has COPD. So she can't wear a mask.
Right.
Like literally she full stop. And I mean, what is she, late 70s, early 80s? Like she's not young. And she goes to the cancer clinic and she is told that she has stage 4 cancer. So basically a death sentence. And she leaves the cancer or the doctor's office or cancer, whatever. No, it was doctor's office or cancer clinic. And she says, I need to settle myself. Like she just got the news. She's got stage 4 cancer. And so she's like, I have to settle myself. I have to calm down. I need to find, some solace. So she goes into a cafe. She can't wear a mask for medical reasons. And the cafe starts going after her, and a fight ensues. And she's basically forced to leave the cafe. And then some radio personality picks up on this and starts, no, she goes home and she's so shocked. She kind of posts on Facebook her experience and she goes to bed. And the next morning, there's just hater after hater after hater. There was this campaign organized by this radio personality to basically attack her. And she was just devastated. So can you imagine, you've just been told you have stage 4 cancer and you go to a cafe because you just need to collect yourself and you get kicked out because you can't wear a mask and you can't. And then there's this hate campaign. There are times where you can't not weep. I mean, there's times after a witness, I can't talk and I'm supposed to be talking. There's a camera on me and tens of thousands of people watching and I can't talk because I'm so choked up. And it's crazy. Another one was Radina, who was part of the Solidarity movement. She testified in Red Deer. So the solidarity movement in Poland,
Mhm.
she was in there on the ground floor. And after the leaders were arrested, she explained, we kept going, and she explained it was a small movement,
Mhm.
and the leaders are, she didn't say arrested, she had some other term, but the rest of the movement is taking care of the families and still trying to get the word out. And she got arrested for, and and you know why she got arrested. Like, how can we tolerate people like this? She was
Mhm.
distributing materials that went against the government narrative.
Yeah.
And a naval court sentenced her to 3.5 years in prison. And she served a year before she got out, and then she came to Canada as a political prisoner, thinking that she would be free here. And now she's worried that, when she goes to freedom rallies and hands out druthers or common ground, that she
Mhm.
could be imprisoned, because that's what she did last time. She's engaging in the same conduct. But she said, and this has haunted me, that people didn't support the movement until they ran out of bread. So they
Mhm.
could not get here. They're living in a full-on police state,
Mhm.
and they're paying the price in small numbers, and they can't get the masses out. And we know that as soon as the masses came out, it stopped.
Yeah.
Like, as soon as the masses of Canadians come out, it stops.
Mhm.
But it didn't happen in Poland, and we're exactly the same. It didn't happen until the bread ran out. And
Wow.
our problem is by the time the bread runs out, and it will,
Mhm.
are we going to be able to take to the streets?